Hi, it's Liz. It's December. It just started to snow. We're getting all cozy. Don't really want to be doing anything outside, but I'm excited because I've been getting seeds in and I'm planning for next year to have a flower garden. I haven't had a flower garden before. I've really stuck to vegetables and I didn't really think why anyone would plant flowers, but it is really essential for the bees, the beneficial insects, and for your garden along with your vegetables. Flower seeds though are a lot different what I'm finding out. There's seeds that you don't cover up at all when you germinate them, or just a little bit of soil because they need the light to germinate. There's different successions that you can plant, so if you want them to bloom at a certain time, then you have to count back those dates. And there's just a lot more entailed that I'm finding out than what it is for vegetables. Vegetables as well, I had a mentor who I would work alongside by and I would learn from different people, but with flower gardening I don't have somebody I can work beside and learn from. So I want to show you this method that was taught to me by my old mentor. She has passed away unfortunately, but she used to do workshops on this, so I thought it would be a really great way to honor her and to show how she did it and how she planned, because we really can't remember everything. And the fact that there's so many different methods and so many different ways and different zones too, because I'm finding out with some of these flowers you can plant them in the springtime, but if you're in certain zones you can actually plant them in the fall directly into the ground because your winters are mild enough. I live on the west coast of Canada, so I think I'm in around like 7B, 7A, just kind of depending on the year. So I'm actually able to sow these into the ground in autumn or in September or August, just depending on the flower, because our winters are mild enough that it will come up in the spring. So that will take a huge amount of time that I don't have to plant. So it's just something to think about, especially if they're annuals. I don't have to start them early. So I just ordered a whole bunch of seeds. I was like, I'm gonna do flowers next year, and then I just went, watched some videos, and then I was like, oh, I'll just order a bunch of seeds. And that's definitely not a great way to do it, but it's, you know, how it is. So what I did is when the seeds came in, I got a notebook, and I didn't really think this too much through. I just was like, you know what, I'm gonna document what items I got and put them in and what company I bought the seeds from. So I started creating this notebook and I was like, great. So I also was creating when do you direct seed them or when do you start them indoors. So say like a status, early spring, but like a Cosmo, you can start them 5 to 7 weeks after your last frost indoors. So to figure out your last frost date and then count the weeks back. So I first started just writing it all down in the book. Now I started having another notebook, and I was trying to remember how she did her workshops. So it's probably been over 10 years ago that she did these workshops that, so I was really trying to remember what she did and how she did it. And I remember you get a seed catalog, and I picked up a couple seed catalogs. It's really great when you're doing this to have a couple of them of the same catalog. So when you cut out the pictures, if there's something on the back that you bought the seed from, then you have another catalog you can take the picture out of. So this one is like West Coast Seed. And usually these come out in the spring. You can request them online as well. So I'm on the west coast of Canada. So this was just at our local Buckerfield, so our local seed store or feed store, and so I just picked up a couple of those. And in those, she says there are the best resources. You want to get some multiple different seed catalogs if you're buying from different companies, because that's where all the great information is coming from. So I got a notebook, and this is not how I recommend doing it. I actually have now switched to a big binder. So I had really great intentions of like, I'm gonna make pictures and collages, and that worked for a little bit, and I started cutting out things from the seed catalog, like 5 tips for beautiful flower bouquets, flower types, what's deadheading, all those types of things, and gluing them in. Then I started cutting out like some of the seeds that I bought. So I had some Chinese asters, a little bit of information about that, and then the picture. And then I would write the other asters that I bought, and then I was thinking, oh, I'll put them all in here. So I started doing that. But then I found out that, especially with flowers, even if they're in the same family, even if they're like a cosmos or like an echinacea, that each flower is a bit different. So majority of the time you can grow them at a certain, you plant them at a certain time, but they have different maturity dates. So I started on a bigger binder and started doing for one seed package, I would put down, the name of it, and then I'd put down the information that was on the back of the seed package and any other information maybe I could find online, because all seed packets aren't really the same. This one is from West Coast Seed. This is a nasturtium, and it has the how high it grows to, the optimal soil temperature. It has how deep you need to plant the seed and how apart the seed is. The thing with this one is it doesn't tell me date of maturity. So the date of maturity is so essential, because when you start and you plant the seed, or sometimes when you transplant it, it'll tell you how many days it takes to bloom. So if it's transplanted, some of them will have an asterisk and say like from transplant day, or some of them will just be from when you seeded it. So it makes a huge difference, because if I'm planting this and I'm like, oh, I want it to bloom in July, then I could plant it earlier, or I could count back the days. I don't know, I have no idea what nasturtiums are, but maybe if it's like 55 days, then you count back, and then you count back to how many days it germinates, and then you can kind of predict of when you would get this crop or this flower, or how long does it take, or does it bloom all year and you can just plant it once, or do you need succession? So really having like this is from Beautiful Blooms. And this one really doesn't have too much information on it, but it has the Latin name, which is really important because some of them also don't have the Latin name. It tells me if it's a perennial, what zone hardy it is, all that different stuff. But you kind of have to do a little bit more research because you want to have a lot more information. So you can also do this online on a piece of paper, and you'd write down the name. You can even grab the seed picture from the catalog and then get all that information in there and then print it out to put in a binder, or if you're just into a digital copy. For me, it's definitely handy to have it as like this, and once I fill it up, maybe after the season ends, then I can laminate them, and that'll really take me further. And if I ever need to sell the plants, or if I'm not doing anything like that, it just won't get dirty, especially because you're going to be working with soil and dirt and all sorts of wintry conditions. So at the front, this is nowhere complete, but I do have like the name of the plant, some information about the plant, and also like I haven't researched it yet, but I'll be putting in like a bit of a background about the plant as well. You can also, I haven't done it yet, is put in the companion plants to plant it with, or the ones that you should avoid. Because I have such a small garden, those are really essential things. So I was looking at a magazine, a Martha Stewart magazine, and she has chives all around the border of her flower gardens. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. She had like 3 big plots of flower gardens, chives all around it. So I was like, okay, well, I know chives are like a beneficial insects come to them when they bloom. They keep away certain pests, especially around the border of your flower garden. I can understand it. But then also, like, what are some non-companion plants that you could put with chives? Like, I have an asparagus bed. Like, you don't want asparagus and chives together. So, like, those types of things would really be beneficial, just like on your cover page. And then on the next page, I have the name, and you can do Latin names, you could do the family names. So like, I don't know too much about the flowers, but say like a kale was in the Brassica family, so you could start doing that, and then you start learning more of those names as well. And it's really tricky because some of the seed companies too it's the same crop or the same plant, it's just that they've renamed it. So you kind of want the Latin name so you can be like, oh, this is the same one as the one I've bought before, because yeah, they're able to do that. Or if they've bred it to a little bit different specifications, then they can rename it completely, and you're just like, oh, if you don't have a picture or a point of reference, it does get really tricky. So then from this catalog, I'd find and go into the flower section, find it, cut it out, and then glue it on here. And that's just a really great point of reference. I can see it, I know what it's gonna look like, I can reference it. So I was thinking whether or not I would put in this binder when I would germinate certain things, but I've decided not to. This is just going to be information, how it grew in the garden, not necessarily the dates and all that. I can have the dates, but maybe what the growing conditions they like, but not have specifics. But I'll put it in here, and then I can always transfer it into here when I found more useful things, but kind of as a draft, I'm going to put it into my other binder. So and then also like for cutting flowers, like what's working well, what doesn't work well. Like I was reading about poppies, and it was like, oh, poppies, I need to, like, when you cut them, you need to use a flame on the bottom, so you know, to prolong them. I don't really know the whole details, but like those are some things you're gonna need to add and make sure that you have that. Some seed packages have it on the back, some of them don't. So for me, when I first started to do it out of this book, I started to realize, oh, there's no way I can do this in alphabetical order, because like what if I just order something and then I won't be able to put it in alphabetical order, because you can't order all the seeds but at once. But so that was really why it was so essential for me to be able to have a duotang that I could move the pages and that I'll be able to find things really easily, because these flower names are not coming natural to me. It's not something like that I see every day or that that I eat. So that's really essential of why I had the duotang. So I just keep on going, and this is a labor of love. Let's be honest, that it's not going to take you like 3 hours. It depends how much seeds you bought too, right? So once the seeds come in, I put it in the binder. Then I have I'm waiting for a couple seed catalogs, and then I'll cut some more pictures out to put into here. And then I will, you know, continue to add through it throughout the year. So it's not a one and done, and it's kind of fun. You get together, when they had the workshops, you would have a whole bunch of seed catalogs. You'd figure out, okay, what they are the things that you eat. What are the things, she would do it for vegetables, so what are the things you eat? Well, when do you want to eat them? And then you start counting the days back. So in the West Coast Seed Catalog, they have these planting legends, and so there's a flower planting chart, and then there's a vegetable one, and then there's just ones per different region, because we're so different, say the south of Canada to the coast of Canada. So we have different like frost dates, and they do put at the bottom what our average frost date is. So like this one is March 28th, which is for the Lower Mainland in British Columbia. So it does tell you when you need to start the plants indoors, when you're going to direct seed them, when you should transplant them, and then when are you going to be able to harvest them. So that's a great starting point. I think just depending also where you live, you can really push back these dates as well. If you also have some sort of tunnel or some sort of, at the farm I was working at, they had an unheated greenhouse. So we could do a lot of things and plant them and then use some row covers, and then you can start things so much easier than what is on these planting charts. So these are like loose planting charts. I would say you're really able to fudge with the dates, and with like grow lights and all those different types of things, you can really change the dates of when you're going to have them. But then you have to think about where are you going to put them if the ground's still frozen. So she didn't do this in the workshop, but what I think I'm going to do is print off a calendar, so a weekly calendar, so that I'm able to have a look at all my seeds of when I need to start them, and then being able to be like, okay, this week I need to be able to plant these 5 seed types. Next week I need to plant this type of seed types, and go on from that, because then you know what you need to do each week, and then no more guesswork. And I think that's really key, is that it does take out the guesswork from you. You still have some leniency if you don't get it right away. Okay, I still can direct seed it, but it's not going to be as early. So I think it really makes a huge difference. Then the next year too, you know, when you have started them early, what conditions they like, and then you just have a jump start trying to remember all the different seed types that you've planted. So when she did the workshops, we would have a big table and all these seed catalogs on there, and she would say, okay, well, you know, make sure that it's mainly vegetables, and write down all the vegetables that you eat, and then when you want to eat them and how long. Right? And then you would go into the seed catalog and find the vegetable that you want, if there's a certain variety you like, and then you would cut it out and be like, okay, well, it's telling me it needs, 55 days and I have to plant it in this month. Then you would be able to count backwards if you're going to start it indoors or if you were able to direct seed it right away. And it really made a huge difference, especially say if people wanted Brussels sprouts, right? Brussels sprouts take like, I don't even know, 110 days or something. So you really need to start the seed in May so that you'll be able to bulk up to a certain size. So then you'd be able to transplant them at a certain month, and then they'd be able to get Brussels sprouts for Thanksgiving or Christmas. So it does take some planning and being able to figure out those times. And also, I know when we did vegetables, winter solstice and summer solstice really did play an effect with the vegetables at different stages. If the vegetable plants were young, summer solstice, which is June 21st, didn't really play too much of an impact. It grew a little bit, but because the plants were so young, they didn't really get too affected by it. But I remember if the plants were more mature, if we planted them from the previous year, or if we planted them in really early spring because we had a really nice spring, some of those plants would be a little bit mature and we're like, oh yeah, we're getting such a great start for this year. We're going to have so much crops. And then it was like, oh, they bolted. So they went to seed because it was at the summer solstice time, and the plants were just like, oh, gotta have my babies and carry on with life. So it was kind of like, oh yeah, I kind of have to remember those days. So I really don't know for flowers if that affects the summer solstice, affects them as much as it does with vegetables, but it is definitely something to think about. It's a bit different if things are in the greenhouse, I remember too, but even like tomatoes here on the West Coast, I remember we'd have to have those tomatoes in the unheated greenhouse by April, like the latest, I think mid-April, but we really tried to have those in the ground. So really, if you want to start things and put them in the ground right as the frost is ending, or right when you're having those cool nights, you need to have those tomatoes to a pretty decent size to be able to transplant them into the ground so that they'll start producing fruit when you want them and have an early season. So thank you so much for watching. I am hoping that this information has been helpful to you and that you're able to make it your own and continue with it, and it'll be a well-needed guided mentoring resource that you can always go back to and add your own information to, and what works for you and what doesn't. So I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!